Hello everyone and welcome back to the Belgian Beer Brothers channel. Cedric here in Antwerp with another brew review. Today we will be tasting a beer from one of Belgium's most renowned breweries, and it's a beer in a forgotten style, despite being extremely popular for decades. Yeah, let's go all out. We are having the Faro from brewery Boon. Now, I know we have talked about the brewery Boon as well as Faro, be it by Lindemans back then, before, but let's quickly recapitulate. Boon is the brewery founded by a back then young Frank Boon, who is also a master craftsman when it comes to barrel making, and he came to earn the nickname the Pope of Geus, because he makes a mean old Geus and he's like, well, the most knowledgeable Geus man in the business. Faro is a sweet and sour light brown beer that is made by adding candy sugar and sometimes spices to a blend of young and old Lambic. This not only purveys the brown color, the slightly light brown color, but mainly makes the beer softer or less tart. In the case of this particular Faro, Frank and his sons use a mixture of Meerts Beer and a small amount of sharp aged Lambic to get that kick in it. Meerts Beer is a form of young light Lambic made from the rest wort, or the second rinsing, the second passing of the grains, so they use the grains for a second cooking step. And even though that might sound like recuperating and selling leftovers, this is not a rare practice. Back in the olden days, it was not only common but just plain normal to rinse the grains 2 or even 3 times, and to make separate brews with each passing, each time with a bit less sugar of course, so with less alcohol in the finished products, because there's less sugar to ferment. And this resulted in a light and especially cheap beer for the commoners, also called clan beer, small beer, anything. And that is still the case today. The second passing, or that small beer, or in this case Meerts, or whatever you want to call it, was drunk by farmers on the field during summer, mainly because of its low alcohol content. And today it's less common, because as a brewer, this sort of limits the amount of control we have, because we know how much sugar is in the malt, but not after the first or second passing. But for example, Tilquin still uses this method for parts of their old Geus. Anywho, enough history for today. I will do a series of videos on different beer styles, and Faro will be one of them, just not today. Now about this beer, Faro Boon is a forgotten classic brought back from the crypts by Frank Boon himself, out of love for forgotten local products, but also in honor of the people that drank it, the commoners, the working man. Originally it had a pale yellow label, and I'll put it up here somewhere, with gold and green borders and a depiction of a hop plant. A few years ago, and I believe that was somewhere around 2020, 2019 maybe, the styling got a slight upgrade, and the beer is still bottled in the same 25 centiliter bottles, but now it sports a plain bright yellow label with no distracting borders, and the hop plant is replaced with the 3 barrels, because actually the hop plant didn't have much to do with Faro in the first place. The 3 barrels carry the Boon logo, the stirring stick and the key. And not coincidentally, these 3 barrels are the barrels that are stacked outside the gates of the Boon brewery, and they are the very first thing you see when turning up the lot. Now about the glasses, Faro used to be drunk out of a classic Geus glass, like a beaker with a thick bottom, or at least something that reminds us of it, a slightly rounder shaped one. Later, flutes were used as well. And these days, it is often drank from chalices, goblets, or tulips. Today I'm going to use this fancy schmancy Boon tasting glass, being a large tulip glass, And I'm actually going to use this just because I like this a bit better than the Geus glass for this beer. With all that being said, I do believe it is time to put it to the test and have a tasting. Plain bottle cap, so they don't use the branded bottle caps for Faro, which is a bit in spirit with the product, because it used to be, because it was the second passing of the malt, it was a quite cheap beer, and originally it was actually only available in barrels, so I do think that that's a slight, an inside joke why this hop blend was replaced by the barrels, because it was only available in barrels or in kegs. I also think that they don't use the branded bottle cap because this was a cheap beer, and to keep it in spirit with not going all out, not having a high cost for a cheap beer. Nonetheless, ooh, smells a bit more sour than I remembered. I do get a bit of a sugary scent, but mainly like a very light lambic. Actually, very lovely scent, lovely aroma. Now, I do say that this hop blend had nothing to do, or not much to do, with Faro in the first place, and that is, of course, because Lambic is made with old hops, because they actually just wanted the bacteriostatic traits of the hop plant, so it was to preserve the beer, and they didn't want that harsh bitterness, and hop loses its bitterness over time, so they used old hops. And of course in a Faro there is candy sugar added, which also cancels out the hop aromas for well, quite the part. Absolutely lovely color, like I said, light brown. Some could argue that this is slightly amber or orangey, gold, copper color. I think it's more of a coppery brown. Again, normally this is a pale beer, a lambic, but with the added candy sugar, it darkens it up quite a bit. Very fresh scent, very refreshing as well. Sweet and sour, soury sweet. I don't know which of the two takes the upper hand. Quite aromatic as well. I do get some berries in there. And a bit of straw, which is not uncommon with lambic products. Again, watching the glass, some bubbles, not too many. It is active, but it's not very lively. Not too much foam, which is also quite common with lambic products and Geus. Of course, we are talking about aged beers, and some of these, again, hop traits as well, reduce the amount of foam that we get. Still, it is closed off from oxygen, because we still have that millimeter thin layer of foam. Now, let's have a taste. Very different from a few other Faros that I know. For starters, when the beer enters the mouth, it has this sweet, sugary, so not candy, but more like sugary, like on a pancake kind of sweetness. And then the slight sourness kicks in. And the funny thing with this Faro in particular is that that slightly sour tart component hits your teeth and your jaws and immediately goes like, so still a slight bit astringent, a slight bit aggressive, and I do believe that that is because many Faro beers are made with 50% young Lambic, 50% old Lambic. But in this case, Frank actually selects by hand, or maybe by nose and taste, this young Lambic, the Meerts Beer, which is the second passing. So he uses the first passing to make good gueus, which is also a very good call on Frank's behalf. And he uses more than 50%. I don't know how much. I have heard stories about being 70 to 80%. Don't have that confirmed. But the rest part is filled up with a young, sharp, sour Lambic. I mean an old, sharp, sour Lambic. And he specifically chooses a sharp sour Lambic because it's so aggressive and because it comes in like so. And I do think that really, really works here. Now, bear in mind, this is a very light, a poor man's beer actually. I do believe it's a 5% ABV. Yes, 5% ABV. I had to check that for an instance. And it is rather cheap as well. I do believe we pay under €1.50 for these. And actually in a larger retail store, probably less, like 120, 130. Bearing that in mind, that this is quite an ingenious process and a very old traditional product. I do believe it is a recognized local product, I believe. Yes, traditional specialty guaranteed by the EU. So bearing all that in mind, that it's cheap, it's very qualitative, it is recognized, it is quite ingenious. I think all those factors should account for a higher score in my case. Well, most aroma is gone now, it's mainly sugary now. Now also because of the candied sugar, and I almost forgot about this because of the sourness, this is a quite light beer, a thin beer, but it still has quite the full mouthfeel, and by that I mean it fills up the whole room. The sourness attacks the jaws, the aroma really attaches to the roof of the mouth, and because of the candy sugar that is dissolved in there, it kind of sticks to the tongue, if you know what I mean. So it does have that full velvety mouthfeel, which is again bullseye. And the aftertaste, in the aftertaste actually the sugar is more dominant, so not necessarily the sourness, but yeah, we get this very, very soft, mainly sweet and a bit sour aftertaste. So again, a very velvety, very soft finish. So I do think that this is a hit for Frank Boon again. Now, about the verdict, let's score this beer. I do think that I have to give this a 3.75 in Untapped. Why? Well, it's not one of my favorite beers. I do like this when it's rather cold, and I do mean the beer, not the weather. So on a hot summer's day, cold Faro, very refreshing, not thirst quenching, I must say. It's actually thirst inducing. But if you drink one of these and then top it off with a rather bitter IPA, like an Houblon Chouffe or something like that, yeah, awesome moment right there. I am gonna leave it at that. As usual, if you guys like this video, let me know, hit the thumbs up or leave a comment down below. Same thing goes if you have any questions or remarks or whatever. And yeah, if you like this and you want to see more, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and you'll be the first to know whenever I upload something, which should be Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 6, and maybe some in-betweens. Cheers, you guys.